I'm Chance Dorland, and this is the Spurs Insider, our weekly NBA podcast from ExpressNews.com, and joined once again now by San Antonio Express News sports writer Tom Orsborn. Great to have you back here on the program, Tom. 4 wins in a row, and then a dropped game, a very surprising one, I'll say that's true, to Orlando. What do you think about the last 4 or 5 games?
Yeah, Chance, it was surprising. I know they were playing back-to-back, but you're at home. You're playing a team that doesn't match you talent-wise. And, they were coming off their best defensive performance of the season against New Orleans, holding that.
I didn't think they were going to beat the Pelicans, no.
Yeah, no, it was a surprise, not only to beat them, but to beat them pretty handily until the end there, when I think they took their foot off the pedal and eased up a little bit. But yeah, Orlando, it seems to be in a feast or famine with them. They got pounded by Orlando last season, and they also just clobbered Orlando in the home game. So, I don't know, maybe it's a matchup thing, and it's just one of those quirks in the schedule. But still, you'd expect them to come out with more energy early on against a team that you should be in when you're at home. But, they were coming off the back-to-back, and maybe that's an excuse, although the players certainly didn't use it as one.
Let's talk more about the positive here. So those 4 wins before that surprising loss to Orlando, what do you think about that stretch?
Well, it's a little bit of fool's gold, I think. You go out to Phoenix on Halloween night, and you are in control of that game from start to finish. Phoenix was without Booker, their leading scorer, and a guy who's given the Spurs problems before. So, you kind of look at that one and say, well, big deal. They did what they were supposed to do against a pretty bad team. And Dallas, that game was closer than it should have been. But still, they're winning. And to start out 6-3 with the number of new faces that they've had and the injuries at the start of the season is certainly an accomplishment. And, speaking of the injuries, we got some good news. The Spurs got some good news recently with the word that Derek White will be back in the fold after missing the start of the season with his heel injury. So that's certainly a step in the right direction, and some well-deserved and long-awaited good injury news.
So let's jump on that real quick. When that player's back into the mix, what does that mean, do you think, for the starting lineup as it is now?
Well, their backcourt was thin with him going down, and DeJounte Murray, of course, being lost for the season, and Lonnie Walker also being out with a knee injury. So they're going to bring White along slowly. He'll probably come off the bench for a few games, and then they'll have to figure out whether they want to replace, put him in the starting lineup and pull back Bryn Forbes, who's been a starter at point guard since the injuries occurred in the preseason. Bryn has done a great job. I mean, he's not going to, he's not the second coming of John Stockton, but they didn't want him to be. They just wanted him to keep it simple, do what he does best, which is shoot the ball from long distance, and let DeMar DeRozan handle most of the ball handling duties. And so far, it's worked really well. Now, Bryn's a little bit of a liability defensively, although his effort is certainly there. So they'll just have to see how Derek fits in. If Derek can play a little bit better defense and handle the ball a little bit more, I think you'll see him going into the starting lineup soon enough. But, Greg Popovich, he zigs when people think he should zag. So it's hard to guess with him. But I'm sure they're just going to give Derek a few games to get his feet under him and just come off the bench and then make that decision at point guard.
Let's step back a bit and attack a few other topics that we want to get to on today's episode, Tom. You wrote recently, this week in fact, that Marco Bellinelli has this uncanny way to really make these off-balance shots. Tell me about that.
He may be the best off-balance shooter, or one of the best in the league, Chance. The guy was, in that Orlando game, he had just such a spectacular play where Patty Mills passed him the ball. It was an errant pass. It was headed out of bounds. Marco is on the opposite side of the Spurs bench, right in front of the courtside seats. He sticks out his left hand, snags the ball, and in one continuous motion puts it up for an off-balance three-pointer from 26 feet out that's swished. And you can look at that play and say, "Wow, what a great play!" Just one of those quirky things, one in a million type shots. But he does it over and over again. He did that. He's done that throughout his career. He really picked it up during his stint with the Philadelphia 76ers in the playoffs last season. And they say that he practices those shots to chance in practice, and he loves contact out there. He'll take the off balance shot. Just a real magician at it. And as DeMar DeRozan said after that Orlando game, he's the one guy on the team you can't beat at horse. The old horse competition where you do trick shots. So Marco's been fun to watch, and I've said this all along. He's been a great addition to this team. It's his second go around with the club. And he just seems so happy to be back, and it just shows on his play on the court. He's averaging about 11 points. His shooting could be better from outside, but he's averaging 88% from the free throw line, and it's just been a good addition. I think that's one of the better additions they made in the offseason, and R.C. Buford, the general manager, deserves a lot of credit.
Yeah, I guess those are like 1 in 500,000 shots then. We're trying to describe what he's doing.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he makes these difficult shots with routine, and nary a game goes by where he doesn't make a shot like that where you just shake your head and say, "What's he doing?" But then he puts the ball in the basket.
So we got a few more topics to tick off before we say goodbye today. Plenty of time left. This is something that's been on the podcast last 2 or 3 episodes, that roller coaster nature of the defense, or I should say just the defense in general, but the roller coaster is what we've been seeing as of late. They play well one game, play poorly the next, where at the beginning of the season, it was just like, well, it's not going to be great. But that's not the case. It really does go up and down.
Yeah, it does. It's frustrating right now to see that happen. The players are frustrated by it. Greg Popovich is frustrated by it. The fans are frustrated. But you know what? Incrementally, they are getting better. The communication's better. Pop's move to insert Dante Cunningham into the starting lineup, I think that was a great move. He brings he's a defensive-minded player, brings a lot of grit to the lineup. That's certainly helped. LaMarcus Aldridge is playing great defense, leading the team in blocks again, and he's a good, solid rim protector. And on top of that, he's just a great communicator. He does a great job kind of quarterbacking that defense from the back end, and the players give him a lot of credit. But it's just not where it should be or where you want it to be. But I think fans everyone just has to accept this isn't the Spurs of yore. I mean, their calling card was always great defense. They're not going to have that this year. They can get better, and I expect them to get better, but they're just not going to be that real stifling, defensive-minded club that we're so used to seeing. And, of course, the rules have changed. The emphasis has changed to open up things offensively.
I mean, yeah, this is something that I spoke recently on another episode. I mean, I was like at a restaurant watching the game. Oh, hey, it's the fourth quarter. Oh, no, that was the third quarter. Those scores are out of nowhere nowadays.
Yeah, exactly. The freedom of movement emphasis that the league's placed. Guys can't clutch, grab. They can't steer. And, they really couldn't before, but they really, really clamped down on it now. They can't steer guys away. The defensive player can't steer the offensive player away, move him to a spot where he wants him to be. So it's just opened things up offensively. And when you couple that with the fact the Spurs have new faces and guys that aren't the stalwart defensive players that they're used to having in the past, it's just kind of a perfect storm. But with that said, I do believe very strongly they'll get better as the season progresses defensively. Hey, Greg Popovich is the coach, and he knows how to coach defense. His staff is great at it. So they'll get better defensively. And as long as you have guys that are willing to work at it, I think that's half the battle. And the Spurs certainly have a bunch of guys that are willing to do what it takes to become better defenders.
A little bit more about the defense, Tom. Do you think it's more important to just get more playing time for the current roster of members of the Spurs, which, as we've noted plenty of times, is very different than a few years ago? Or do they need to really get in some practice time and run some plays? Where do you think the real maturity for them lies?
Yeah, it comes with repetition and just more playing time together as a unit. That's the key thing. With this crazy NBA schedule, practice time is really hard to come by. You just don't get that much practice during the season that you would like to have. So it's got to be done on the fly. It's got to be done in games. And, you do what you do in a game, and then maybe you need the next day to shoot around and look at the tape and try to figure out what you did wrong and go from there. Good thing about this team, Dante Cunningham pointed this out, Chance, is that they have been they've done a good job of taking criticism from Pop and then fixing it. So that's a good sign. But again, they're very inconsistent right now. And I think, as you said, just with more repetition, more playing together, they should be able to work things out and show some improvement. Not to the point that we're used to seeing from the Spurs defenses of the past, but I think this team can get better defensively.
That being the case, a tougher schedule seems to be on its way. So talk about that.
Yeah, beginning on November 12th, they play. That's the game at Sacramento that kicks off a 3-game road trip. But beginning with that game, they play 8 of their next 10 on the road. And you look at the schedule, it begins with Sacramento, which is a very improved team. You've got Phoenix up next. Booker should be back, so that will be a tougher battle. The Clippers, they round out that 3-game road trip with a game with the Clippers. Clippers are holding their own this season. Then they come home, they play Golden State, and you got to mark that one down as a loss. And they're back on the road at New Orleans. I expect the Spurs always have trouble in New Orleans for whatever reason. So you could mark that down as a loss. They come back home. They play Memphis. Memphis has been, they're pretty decent right now. And then you've got you close that stretch out chance with a 4-game road trip at Indiana, at Milwaukee, 2 of the top teams in the East. You get a breather at Chicago and at Minnesota, but they're going to have their work cut out for them with this stretch of playing 8 road games in the next 10 games. And they were not a good road team last season. So, yeah, you look at that and you're going to find out a lot about this club during that stretch.
Tom, I think it's really refreshing that you say, Golden State put that down as a loss. This team put that down as a loss. I like the no fuss there. That's just straight talk. So for the next games, we got a game today. We got a game on the 10th. What do you think is going to be the case for the next 2 games before that tough stretch that you just talked about? Yeah, well,
they're at Miami tonight, November 7th. They're at Miami. Miami, they've had some injury problems with Hassan Whiteside, but I think he's going to be able to play. Spurs will be without 2 of their front court players, and Pau Gasol and Rudy Gay, who have foot issues. So I can see that game being pretty much a toss-up. Then they come home and they play Houston, and Houston seems to be getting things back in order. They won 3 in a row. They're 4-5. And a good subplot to that game, Chance, will be DeMar DeRozan going up against James Harden, who is they're good friends. They come from the same area of Los Angeles. There's a good competition between those 2 guys. So it's going to be a good, entertaining battle, kind of a one-upmanship type affair. I think fans will really enjoy watching those 2 guys go at it. But yeah, that'll be a tough one too. Yeah, I mean that's definitely a tough one too. So I could see them losing these next two going into that road trip that begins with the game at Sacramento.
Some tough love from Tom Osborne, but he's keeping it real. I like that. We got several minutes left, Tom. Let's talk about someone you just mentioned, DeMar DeRozan. Obviously, that's a big new name in San Antonio, and I think a lot of people are happy with what they're seeing. It's been a great transition, and certainly, boy, leagues ahead of what we had before.
Well, yeah, he's averaging 27.6 points per game. I think that's in the top 5 in the NBA. He's averaging 6.7 assists. I think that's in the top 20. He's tied for the team lead in steals with 1.2 steals per game. You know, he's just exceeded expectations, and he's been a joy to watch and a joy to be around. Real professional, great in the locker room. You know, great with the media. Very accessible. Gives good quotes. You know, the jury's still out about that trade, but you know,
I mean, you know, without Kawhi, I mean, it certainly was better than without Kawhi. But yeah, the jury is out on the trade. I agree with you there.
Yeah, but they're getting so much from DeRozan. He's just a great player. I mean, I like to describe him as a guy that can roll out of bed and give you 25 to 30 points. I mean, he just does it. He's a great scorer, and you know, Jakob Poeltl, who is also involved in that trade, he's gotten off to a rough start. I mean, he started early on, but then he had some defensive lapses. Pop had him on the bench for quite a number of games. He only got garbage time for a good 3, 4, 5 game stretch. And then against Orlando, he finally got some meaningful minutes, and he made the most of them. He played pretty well. And I talked to Jakob after that game, and he said his game plan was just to show his hustle and just to kind of fall back on the things that made him a good player, an up-and-coming player in Toronto. Just hustle and rebounding and blocking shots and banging with the other bigs. We saw all that, and I don't know if it's enough to get him. He'll play more tonight against Miami with Pau Gasol being out, but it's still, he's a work in progress. He's into a new system. He's a young player, and they're just going to have to be patient with him. But yeah, as far as DeMar goes, you know, he's been great all around, great to deal with, great guy.
And a big thanks to San Antonio Express News sports writer Tom Osborne for joining me for today's episode of the Spurs Insider, your weekly NBA podcast from expressnews.com. For the San Antonio Express News, I'm Chance Dorlin.